Sykes, the Bottom Line Pharmacy podcast. We've got a great show for you this week, but before we get into the show, if you find this episode valuable, please like, share, and subscribe so we can help more independent pharmacy owners. Also, visit us at pharmacyaccounting.com. If you're overpaying in tax, if you're prepping to start, buy, or sell a pharmacy, or just have a gut feeling that your financials aren't quite right, we have a suite of services for every need your pharmacy is facing. Go to pharmacyaccounting.com and we can help you. Okay, now on to the show.
Welcome everybody to another episode of the Bottom Line Pharmacy podcast. We've got Bonnie, Austin, and Ollin Sykes with us today. President, founder of Sykes Company. Been around pharmacy since the beginning. So, Dad, tell us about, kind of give us a sense of, where you think pharmacy is today and where it's been from years past when you got into it back in the 70s, if I'm correct there. And tell us about your feel about the pharmacy evolution and the.
Well, when I first got in it, it was pharmacies were writing the big checkbooks. They had those big checkbooks. They had 3 to a page. They'd write it on a stub. You pick up the stubs in the bank statements at the end of the month physically. You walk across the street and you do data processing in order to be able to understand what the numbers were in the pharmacy. And at that point in time, you didn't have third-party receivables. There was no insurance billing. It was pretty much all cash. So it was all typically billed or paid for at the counter. Credit cards had just started to be used in that point in time back in the 70s. There were no inventory controls, no robots, no nothing of that nature.
How about those gross margins back then?
Oh, those gross margins were in the 60s for a regular retail pharmacy. I can remember that. Fast speed to today where you've got robotic technology, you've got it where we can dial our prescription number in on the phone. In the morning when we take our pills and we've taken the last one, we put the number in, says it'll be ready by 11 o'clock this morning. And if the system is properly set up, it would have already billed our insurance. It would already taken it out of inventory. The system would fill the script, put it in the bottle, put the label on the bottle, and all the pharmacist has to do is lay their eyes on it, make sure it's correct, put the cap on it, and pick it up at the counter. So the whole mechanism and process of delivery has completely changed. The accounting for that is also changed because the point of sale pharmacy management systems are such that it handles all of the receivables, the cash controls, the daily reporting, the dispensing logs automatically, so that management information is available to the pharmacists as well as to us as outside third-party CPAs, which facilitates the whole process of monthly and closing. So it's come a long, long ways. But the advent of third-party billing and insurance companies back in the late 80s and 90s is really what's changed the whole process, probably more than anything else.
Yeah, that definitely complicates it.
Elaborate on that, because you went from 60% margins to today where it's 16 to 19.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, CMS was the big culprit there when that bill was passed. I think that was, in the Obama years?
Bush 04 Part D, was it, or something?
Yeah, I think it was. But when all that stuff started and the K Street lawyers in D.C. wrote the law for the congressmen who didn't have a clue what they were passing, whatever they paid those lawyers for a fee was not enough because the PBMs, who are now in a much smaller concentrated group of providers in this country, are really leading the way with respect to being the prime middleman of any business I've ever seen in my life. And they're just sucking it dry. and margins have depleted from those early
From
days
that.
of the 60s down to some cases single digits, depending on what's being filled.
So when you take that reality and then you apply it to today versus years ago, I'm guessing, and down here, Michener's Pharmacy down here, they were just filling scripts, and that was about the extent of what they did. As the markets changed, pharmacies and their roles and what they're doing in their pharmacies has changed. So speak to that.
That's correct. The whole role of delivery of medicines, billing of medicines, controlling of the inventory, the mechanism of filling the scripts has changed. But what hadn't changed with independence is that personal touch that hopefully is still there with the independents, not only of today that we deal with here locally, who's been there for 100 plus years, change of ownership, obviously. But that personal attention is such that I don't have to go down to my CVS and be the sixth car in line waiting to drive up window to pick up something, and they don't care whether I show up or not. I feel like when I walk in my pharmacy down here, they know who I am. They know my name. They know that basically I want to charge my copays and send me a bill. I pay it in full monthly. Very few pharmacies are still doing that. My pharmacy is still doing that for selected accounts. And while my local pharmacy may not have the automated technology that I wish that they had, I think in time that will change. It'll have to change in order for them to be competitive. And what will also have to change is they'll be forced into clinical services, providing those clinical services they're not providing now. So something more than vaccines and immunizations will have to be done for them to compete in this industry. Because I don't look at Congress making changes in the PBM laws in the near term. I mean, even if they change them in the near term, it's going to take years for that to filter through the system and have an impact. So I don't see that being something that happens in the near term to midterm, quite frankly.
So I was going to get to, from obviously the service standpoint is critical and what sets pharmacies apart. But I was going to get to the point where pharmacies of yesterday were filling scripts, and that's what they did.
That's it. Yeah.
Today, it's a whole myriad of different revenue opportunities.
That's correct.
And thinking outside the box and evolving that pharmacy role. And other states are starting to jump in on that trend of being able to test and treat and things like that. So the role
yes, they are.
is expanded.
And, for example, Bonnie and I looked at a pharmacy yesterday in Montana where we class code the revenues. And I bet she had 15 different clinical service type
At
revenues
least. Yeah.
and OTs. It might have even been close to 20 of items that she is serving her patient in a rural area there, in addition to a 340B contract. So she's hit upon every opportunity she can in a rural area in Montana. And frankly, she's killing it. Her margins are just through the roof in comparison to what the typical pharmacy who is not doing that type of thing is doing. And, we also have clients that we deal with that are so far advanced in their delivery of clinical services. It's just even beyond me to understand even what they're doing in their pharmacy. I got a buddy in Virginia who is just taking it to a whole nother level of having nurse practitioners, medical practitioners literally in his office with patient appointments, and just doing anything you can imagine in the healthcare arena to derive income and to serve his patients in a high-income demographic area.
Yeah. I don't even think you can call it opportunity anymore. I think, 10 years ago, it was opportunity as far as, hey, try these other things and you can really generate more revenue. I think now it's you have to do it. I mean, you can't it's like, what are you
doing?
necessary. Yeah. What are you doing other than, And it's different for every community. Like the example Ellen just used about our friend in Virginia. I mean, he does all sorts of things, but that may not work in certain
Montana.
rural areas or whatever,
Yeah.
right? But you have to figure out what works, with your group of folks. But you got to do something.
You cannot stay stagnant. You cannot just fill scripts. As we tell people, if you're just filling scripts in 5 years, you won't be in business. There's just no way.
And sometimes it's a short-term thing that you ride. It's kind of like all of the injectables for the weight loss that was so big last year, and that kind of came to an end for a lot of people. But it was very profitable during the period that it was available. And then you have to kind of ride that and then move to the next thing. But you've got to be able to pivot and do what's necessary, for sure.
It's constantly changing.
Yeah.
I mean, frankly, why would you just want to fill scripts anyway? If you're a pharmacy owner and you're in business, don't you want to push the envelope for your industry and grow your practice and grow your scope of service and grow all that? So to me, it's just part of being a business owner.
Well, it is, but you've got folks that don't want to change, Scotty. And for those that don't want to change and want things to be the way they used to be and sit around and complain about it, then, that's what happens. And they don't change.
And on a side note, I would just like to say that, I've worked at Sykes Company for 21 years, and Ollin is not one of those people. He embraces change, loves change.
I hope I'm not one of those people.
We like to
Don't change, but we're getting
Yeah.
we like to say, we're so tech savvy that we were the first people with the fax machine. So we're
That's
ahead of
correct.
the curve on the.
Could I
Back in
clarify, like the first
1983,
fax
by the way.
machine, the first fax machine ever, or the first fax machine in our town?
No, the first one probably in our area, and I remember
Okay.
that was in 1980. That was in 1983,
Okay, just want to be really clear.
and the first one to buy an Osborne computer on a road trip to Chicago, a trade show. I remember I went to a CPA trade show, and I literally went down on Michigan Avenue, at
On
some
the
computer
street?
store, and bought an Osborne computer and brought it back with me on the plane. And it had SuperCalc and WordStar with it, and that was in the early 80s. And I actually still had that Osborne in my closet.
Wow, I was
Kathy.
about to ask. You still have it?
Unless my wife has thrown it away.
Kathy and I were at the Arkansas Pharmacy Trade Show, and she told me about the Osborne computer, and I had no idea what that was. I never even.
I
heard of
actually
it,
have to say
so
that I don't either.
It was a
I had no
luggable.
idea.
It was a luggable with 2 floppy drives.
I remember you had some briefcases, some large suitcases in our office growing up. So those are
Yep.
I
These
do
were
remember
the
floppy drives. I do remember the floppy disk drives that you stuck in the computers.
But they
Talk
had good
about-
first dial-up internet around here too. I remember that.
Oh wow!
There was like
Oh, I had dial-up internet.
cords all over the living room.
Look, I had dial-up internet when we were on King Street, way before you were born. And we bought that house in 1982, and I can remember in 82 and 83 having a Radio Shack, something that I dialed up, got that tone, and connected, and was on the internet.
Ooh, in 1982.
They still have
Pretty impressive.
Radio Shacks around. We actually
Really?
just got
Yeah.
a pharmacy. We actually just got a RX assessment yesterday. Pharmacy has a Radio Shack in their pharmacy.
We've had many
Whoa.
pharmacies that have had
Yeah.
Radio Shack
Radio
type
Shacks. I
stuff.
just didn't know that was still a thing.
No,
Yeah.
it's still around. They're still around. Yeah,
Gen Z's bringing it back.
yeah.
I loved to go in a Radio Shack when I was little, but
So on you're touching on a lot of key points here. Talk to us about 40 years, because Sykes has been around for over 40 years in the pharmacy space. Talk about you talked about some of the changes that you've seen in pharmacy, but just talk about like that historical, but also innovative accounting firm experience that clients get when they work
Well,
with us. And
we've
important that
always
is.
been prided ourselves in being first and foremost on the technology front, even if it's like these things we were talking about back in the early 80s. And all that led to in-house systems, many computers. We did a tremendous amount of data processing earlier on internally with big Burroughs systems. I remember we had, but it's been a constant upgrade and a constant process to have the latest state of the art. And now we are 100% in the cloud. Everything is taking place. AI is obviously changing everything dramatically, whether it's tax research, whether it's answering basic questions, whether it's replacing Google. Yeah, it's replacing Google. It's just amazing what is going to be happening here in the coming years. It's amazing what's out there in this marketplace today and how much
I'll
it's
tell you
changed.
what. I'll tell you what AI is not going to be able to replace, though, and that's the advisory piece.
That's
Yes.
correct.
Advisory. It's one thing to be able to have the numbers. It's another thing to be able to have like an accountant or a CPA with over 40 years, decades of experience working with hundreds of pharmacies to be able to look at that data and say like, hey, here's what this means and here's what you can do with it.
Also, that's the key point, and that's something we tell, and I know we got a limited amount of time here, but I know we tell every client we've got, we have no conflicts of interest. And with our decades of experience with the hundreds of pharmacies we deal with, we can offer that advice and counsel to pharmacy owners and share with them what we know and understand. Primary example is even a question this morning that came up about this third-party insurance situation where the pharmacies are forming their own insurance companies and what other pharmacies we're running into are doing with respect to their marketing. I mean, it's just constantly changing. And because we can talk about it openly and honestly and share these experiences, there's nobody in the industry that has the wealth of knowledge that collectively we have that can share that data and share that information with our client base, for sure.
Right.
And understanding where pharmacy was in the past to where it is now, because, going back to what you mentioned earlier, a lot of pharmacies used to do cash only. It's kind of how they started. They had those 60% margins. Now we're seeing pharmacies, some pharmacies go back to that cash only model. And so you've got work with previous pharmacies where all they did was cash. And then now you've got pharmacies getting into that arena. You've got that historical knowledge on one side. So you kind of have a model and an understanding of what it was like before and how it can work again. This thing is very interesting. Yeah.
Pleasure being with you, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for everybody for listening in. We appreciate you, and anything we can do to help you, just reach out to us and let us know. We'll see you on the next one. Thank you.